kick things off and introduce myself. My name is Alec Cooley. I'm a senior advisor with Busch Systems, and I will be your moderator and host today. And I thank you for joining us for this program. Today's focus is entitled Into the Green Bin, Collecting Food Waste from Institutional Settings. And as the title implies, we're going to be focusing a lot about food waste collections from different types of settings, including universities, government offices, K-12, and others. We've got a great program for you today. This is part of our ongoing Green Thinking webinar series. We do these programs roughly once a month on different topics, all related to nuts and bolts issues with waste reduction, waste diversion, etc. So I thank you for joining us. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the other programs we've done and that we have coming up at the end of the program. For today's program, we have a stellar panel of experts with many years of experience in the field. Just to make some quick introductions, we have Gary Bilbrough, who is with EcoSafe Zero Waste, who is also a partner with Busch Systems on this program as well as business. And we have Jack Hockrider, who is with the Foodprint Group, Abby Massaro with the Center for Ecotechnology in Massachusetts, and we have Heather Cashwell, who is with North Carolina State University. And we'll talk a little bit more about what they'll be presenting on in a minute or two. So for this program, we're going to start off with some brief 7 or so long minutes case study presentations from each of our panelists. And then we're going to reserve a good chunk of the program, about 40 minutes or so, for more of an open panel discussion. We encourage folks to share questions and answers at any point during the program, and I'll take 1 or 2 questions after each individual presentation, but then we'll save most of these for the panel discussion and weave your questions into the different topics that we'll be covering. Finally, at the end of the program, we're going to do a product demonstration. We do keep a firewall between our programming and the marketing side, but at the end of the program, for those who are interested, I encourage you to stay on. I have some colleagues from our sales team who will talk about some of the products that Busch Systems sells for recycling and trash bins. So we'll have that opportunity if you're interested. So as I said, we encourage folks to submit questions and answers. I know we all have a certain degree of fatigue with webinars, and so we really want to try and make this as interactive as possible and not simply make this about talking heads. So in addition to submitting questions and answers, which you can see there is a very distinct thing on your Zoom toolbar to submit those. These are for the questions that you specifically want panelists to respond to. If you want to just simply offer thoughts, your own experiences, we also encourage that. What have you tried? What has worked? What has not? As we're focusing on different topics, I strongly encourage folks to just drop your own experience into the chat function, which is separate. In some cases, I may pull out some of those notes and read them out loud, but if nothing else, it's just something that we can all share and interact with other attendees. Also, keep in mind that during the program, we're going to have a number of resources, website links that different panelists are referring to. Keep an eye on the chat box where my colleague Rebecca will be dropping in notes about how you can follow up on some of these links. So let's set stage for today's program. Over the last 40 years, there's been a significant public and private investment into developing collection systems for recycling and even for yard waste across the US and Canada. During that time, however, food waste has largely been on the periphery. There have been early adopters, institutions that have organized food composting programs, but it's really only in recent years that these efforts are significantly starting to move into the mainstream. This trend is obviously now starting to gather speed, and that can be underlined by a couple of recent statewide mandates that have passed in California and Massachusetts that actually are requiring aggressive moves to keep food waste out of the landfill, as well as encourage waste prevention and recovery. Behind this push is a recognition that food waste makes up a significant part of the waste stream. And more importantly, that organic material that enters the landfill is transformed into methane, which is a significant greenhouse gas, much more powerful than carbon. And so there's a strong need to try and keep this material out of the landfill. But of course, there's a reason the food diversion programs have lagged behind. For all the challenges of building a recycling infrastructure, collecting food waste presents a whole slew of additional issues. There are the unique operational logistics. There are the issues with odors and pests, lack of service providers or compost facilities nearby to handle material. The low trash tipping fees in many parts of the US and Canada make food recovery uneconomical to different degrees. Perhaps the greatest challenge is simply overcoming the confusion that many people have about what they're supposed to put into a compost bin. Fortunately, we have a lot of knowledge about how to address these issues with our program today. Our panelists bring years of experience and lessons learned to today's program, and so I look forward to hearing from them. One last note, I do want to acknowledge that this program is really going to be focused on the food waste collection programs, but it is noteworthy that this is at the bottom of the hierarchy. As the US EPA and Canadian governments have both pointed out, we need to be focusing first and foremost on waste prevention. How do we keep food waste from being generated? The material that is generated, how do we get it edible food to others that can actually be eaten? Food composting is the last best option before things go to the landfill. But we do want to acknowledge these other priorities. There are other programs and lots of resources that focus on these higher issues. Today's program, simply because this is such a large topic, we're going to focus just on the collection side. But I do want to encourage folks to be thinking in terms of waste prevention as well as we go along. So with that, let me introduce our first speaker. We have Gary Bilbrough, who is with EcoSafe Zero Waste. And I will hand it over to Gary to take it from there.
Thank you, Alec, and thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Busch Systems. Really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this webinar. I'm very excited about this. This is a great opportunity to share some very good information about these types of programs. One of the things that we do at EcoSafe is we don't just make compostable products, compostable liners and gloves and things such as that. We actually help the waste generators, the folks out there like yourselves and others that have the opportunity to take their waste, their food waste, and separate it into a different bin. One of the things I always like to tell everybody is, because I always get the questions, what am I going to do with all my waste? Well, we will never, nobody that wants you to do the right thing with your waste will ever tell you have to create new waste. As Alec just said, you're actually going to have the opportunity to look at what you're throwing away. In many cases, you have the opportunity to see what you're throwing away and then be able to reduce what you're throwing away as you go forward. And Alec, for some reason, I can't get it to move forward. There it goes. Thank you. So let me tell you just quickly about a little bit about what EcoSafe does, what we're all about. We are, again, we're innovators. We believe in being able to provide information to people who are buying something that they're typically not used to buying. So if you're going to be buying compostable products, you really need to know about those compostable products and how to use them. A lot of our competitors out there, they're selling bags, they're selling gloves, they're selling whatever. We're actually providing information on how to use what you're purchasing from EcoSafe. And we're really experts in making composting second nature in all different types of aspects, residential, institution, commercial, whatever types of setting. Okay, Alec. Okay. Oh. Can you go back one, Alec? Okay, thank you. So tools are very, very important if you want to try to do something like this. Again, we're not telling you that you're going to generate new waste streams. We're actually telling you that you're actually going to have the opportunity to look at the waste streams that you're generating today. And as Alex says, the hierarchy is if you have edible food, it's really good to be able to get that edible food to feeding hungry people. 50 million people go to sleep hungry every single day in the United States. So the opportunity to get edible food to hungry people is a great opportunity. You only know that you have edible food if you're actually paying attention to the waste that you're generating. But you need tools. So tools like the bags, like the bins, we think the system should be easy, very simple, and not too cumbersome. So, we've seen signage all over the gamut as far as what types of signage are created. We think signage should be very simple. Busch Systems does an exceptional job of keeping their signs very simple so you understand what goes where. Okay, next screen, please. So Alec mentioned the mandates that are out there. If you have questions, or if you're in a community or a state or a municipality where you have now been told you have to compost and you have no earthly idea how to do it, then you need a company like EcoSafe and Busch Systems and the folks that are out on this presentation today. You need our help to be able to try to guide you and help you in the right direction. So really, one of the goals for us today is to try to provide you with that information to where it'll make it easier for you to do it. It really should be a very simple, easy transition. And ultimately, obviously, everybody's worried about COVID today. Is this going to cause any health issues? I can tell you it won't. One of the things you need to do is make sure that any programs you implement is clean and safe. Okay, Alec. So Alec mentioned contamination. It is extremely important, and it depends on where you are. Believe it or not, we have done school programs where elementary school kids have 400 people in the school generated through a day's worth of effort, and they're putting the materials in the bins, less than 1% contamination. Yet you go to a multi-residential building where you have adults who should know right from wrong, and they consistently put the wrong things in the wrong bins. So it is something that, because we've been taught through the years bad habits, we tend to continue those bad habits and not pay attention to what we're doing. Where the kids, you tell them once, they typically get it, they go for it, and they do it. Matter of fact, in a lot of our school systems, we actually have the school kids develop their own signage because it makes it very easy for them to start to understand what they're doing. And again, this can be done in any single type of a situation, whether it's an office building, a hospital, a grocery store, a restaurant, you name it. Next slide, please. Yeah, you want to do this, not that. You want to make sure you're paying attention to what you're putting in each of the bins. So the program is really, it's all about understanding your waste stream. Again, it's not rocket science stuff here. We tell people in our multi-residential programs and our school programs and everything else, it's, let's start with the food scraps, and then let's work our way up to all the compostable products that you're using and utilizing in your facilities and your buildings, and try to make sure we can get you closer to that zero waste stream. Okay, Alec. So one of the reasons that I talk to a lot of people all the time about it, so why is it so important and what's the benefit? Well, not only are you keeping all this material out of the landfill, which obviously creates a lot of methane, does a lot of environmental harm, but you're allowing composters to be able to manufacture a product that will create healthy soils and allow us to be able to rejuvenate our soils to be able to feed hungry people for years to come. Okay. So Alec mentioned some success stories. These are just some things, and please make sure you get my contact information at the end of this webinar, because we'll be able to provide you with some folks maybe that you can contact that are in the same type of environment that you're in. Maybe it's an office building or a school, and they can help you, let you know how they managed to get through the process. Again, it should be an easy step to take. I know a lot of you maybe from California or maybe from Massachusetts. Over the past year, we've been working with hundreds and hundreds of waste generators and end users in those areas to be able to help them start their programs and make them successful. A successful program means everybody's involved, everybody's engaged, and you don't have a lot of contamination issues. Next screen, please. So improve your office settings. This is one of them from Sarah. She, the idea that you can make your own signs, this is kind of proof positive that it works. When you have individuals and people within your office environment or your school or wherever generating their own signs, they understand the program, and then they start telling other people because they're passionate about it, because they help generate signs. Okay, next screen. And you want to make this thing as easy for your staff. You know, handling waste streams is, because you're separating out your food waste, it's not going to be done by different people. You're not going to have to hire different people. It's going to be done by the same people that have been typically doing your trash recycling. Now they got another bin to maintain. And we have found over and over and over again from folks that we work with that they love the Busch Systems bins because they're so easy to maintain and manage. But secondly, it's the fact that they are all right there together. So they only still have to go by that one station one time and make sure that everything is clean and ready to go. Okay. Next screen, please. So that's my introduction. Obviously, I'm going to be around for the Q&A afterwards, but I really do appreciate, again, Busch Systems and Alec for putting this together. And I'm looking forward to our opportunity after everyone's done their presentations to be able to answer your questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gary. So next we're going to do, we have a series of poll questions that we want to raise. So in a moment, you'll see this pop up in your screen, and go ahead and respond to this. The question is, what sources of food waste are you currently collecting at your facility? And obviously, if you are not don't have an active program, then just you can click that first one. But if you can click those that apply to you, that'd be great. Gary, we had a question coming in about compostability of your products, but also I think it also extends to compostable products in general. Could you give just like a quick overview about how not everything that's shown to be or it's listed as compostable actually breaks down in a landfill? Could you touch on that and also as far as the products that you guys sell specifically?
Sure. So first off, let me just say the EcoSafe products, all of our products are certified by the BPI and certified by the CMA, the Compost Manufacturers Alliance. That's very important because everything that we want to put into these bins for composting needs to go to a composter that needs to be able to successfully put that material in their piles to be able to manage and have Mother Nature and the microorganisms eat that material up to create the compost soil, which benefits our farmers and our fields and anything we want to grow. So the important thing is to understand, if you're going to be trying a composting program, you want to use certified compostable. If it's green, it doesn't necessarily mean it's compostable. It may say biodegradable, and biodegradable was an old term used back in the industry a while back for things that would decay in the ground or in a landfill or in a compost site even, but maybe it took 180 days or 200 days or 300 days. You really want things that are compostable, certified compostable. I like to tell all of our customers that our liners, our bags, our gloves, all of our products that are 100% compostable will decay about the same rate as the food waste that it contains in a commercial composting environment. And so it is very important. If you're going to do any type of a program, please do your homework. And if you don't understand it, please contact someone like myself or someone at EcoSafe and get the information. There's also great information out there on the U.S. Composting Council's website when it comes to compostable products. But I really implore you to look at the BPI website, look at the CMA website, and make sure what you're buying is certified compostable.
Great, thank you. So we're going to hold other questions for the time being, but just to come back to the live poll, if we can go ahead and show the results up on the screen. We'll, it looks like we had about 45% of folks said that they are doing back of house collection for kitchen prep. Another 34 are doing front of house dining scraps, collecting directly from people eating items. About 39% collecting from offices and other dining locations, and it looks like about 22% say they're collecting compostable packaging. So that's good to know. That sort of tracks with my expectation that there's back of house collecting from kitchen scraps is a lot easier. There's a lot less involved in terms of the behavior side. So that tends to be where programs get started and evolve from. So that's good to see. We can. Okay, it looks like we can, Rebecca, if we can go ahead and turn that off, then we'll move on to our next presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and welcome Jack Hockrider, who is with the Foodprint Group. And Jack, you should have control of the cursor, and I'll let you take it away from here.
All right. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Jack Hockrider. I'm the Director of Client Services at Foodprint Group. We're a zero waste consulting group. We've worked with a variety of industries across the globe, primarily food and hospitality, but also some offices and institutions to help redesign and rethink their operations to design waste out. Today, I'm excited to present on behalf of a client of mine that's an international bank who, unfortunately, we weren't able to get internal approval at time to present alongside me, but I am able to share their journey. We've been working with them for a while, so this is going to be pretty much a long, deep dive into a case study. And recently, they officially reached zero waste, which we were able to confirm through Foodprint's waste tracking app called Tracks. So I wish they were here so that we could tout this wonderful achievement for them, but I'll be the one waving their anonymous zero waste flag for the time being. Okay. So their food waste reduction journey began about 7 years ago. They started small in their headquarters cafe. They had a large cafe they have in their headquarters, but used it as an opportunity to slowly sensitize the idea of diverting wasted food in a more controlled setting. So this is the pilot program, which has a lot of benefits to starting small. This was intentional as well, given that this area is where most of food waste would be generated. One note here is that with the introduction of composting in the cafe, this was both back of house and front of house, their food service operator at the bank was brought into conversations early about the bank's commitment to reducing waste in general, their goals for reducing climate emissions, which food waste is one of their largest drivers for them. So it was required and included in the food service operator's contract that they begin composting, which is a great tactic to take. They also had compostables for to go and reusables for to stay. And they were successful for a couple of years, except contamination was quite high in organics in the beginning, namely due to the compostables, which I'll touch upon briefly in a bit. So in 2018, we introduced reusable clamshell containers and also conducted an audit to see that they were currently diverting about 23% of their food scraps. We expanded programming and saw success with their efforts in 2019. 2020 was 2020. And in 2021, we expanded food waste collection with centralized resource recovery stations throughout their office, first starting with the pilot floors and then expanding to the entire building, including, and I'm proud to say, the executive floors, which we know can be a challenge. But we worked with them to create sort of executive business case decks to sensitize it and make the case for why it matters that leadership be on board, especially given that this bank in particular had sustainability as a strong brand value for their business. And so it was a badge of honor for them to be able to walk the walk. I mentioned this briefly before, but they recently reached zero waste, which we confirmed when they began tracking waste daily with our Foodprint Tracks app. And that data was a very large push when it came to getting leadership on board, as well as it gave their marketing team wonderful fodder. So if you are interested, there's a demo video that Rebecca linked in the chat to see what Foodprint Tracks is, how it's used, and all that. All right, so their audit results in 2018, after we conducted this audit, we recognized that they could have reached close to zero waste, 90% diversion, better from landfill and incineration, without changing any purchasing habits by simply capturing all of their wasted food, essentially more than doubling their current food waste diversion. This kind of look, a type of audit like this, to get a kind of look on your waste really helps to quickly determine what the priority steps are that will have the most benefit towards reaching zero waste or reaching a certain percentage of waste diversion. And it's not an audit, but we do have a free zero waste scorecard on Foodprint Group's website that's linked in the chat. So if you want to see where some of your priority actions might be, if you haven't started a program yet, it can get you at least started thinking about what you might do as a first step. What I mentioned before about compostables, one of the biggest barriers for their food waste reduction program in the beginning, after addressing perceived fears around smells, so on and so forth, was compostable serviceware. Reason being is that once compostables were tossed into the organics container, it began looking like trash, or it began looking like recycling. If you think about PLA plastic cups, clamshells, utensils, which made all of the streams look very similar and therefore caused user confusion, then leading to contamination because people were throwing in whatever everywhere. And as you can imagine, that caused issues down the line at the organics processing facilities when they couldn't tell the difference between PLA and plastic. So in this instance, compostables were a little bit of chaos, whereas reusables, which we implemented in 2018, reduces confusion and therefore contamination. So reusables look different. They feel different when you're using them, less likely to be tossed into a bin. So taking serviceware out of the organic stream in this instance made the organics much cleaner. It actually looked like organics. It looked like a totally different waste stream. So it helped users take another second to think about what they should be throwing in there. In addition to that change, to help increase participation and reach the desired diversion, we did a number of things. We collected case study data, peer experiences, and best practices. This was very big for leadership. We aligned the change to bringing in the centralized resource stations with return to office post-COVID, which this is really useful since the habit of whatever they were doing with their desk bins was sort of halted for a while. Doing a new program when there's some space does help bring about proper diversion habits. They also solicited us for design expertise on placement. We talked about traffic flow and egress, so on and so forth. We kept the consistent color coding with various visual cues. You can see on the right-hand side, all the waste streams have a certain color to them. The color is also around the opening. The shapes are all different. These are all very good ways to keep it consistent throughout the space to let it be known that these are different waste streams that will be handled differently throughout the building. And then we focused on raising awareness through multiple means. Some are in the next slides, but one right here, which is new, was that we provided every occupant with a desktop mini bin for waste storage temporarily so that they could collect some things. And then on that, we used that as an opportunity for raising education and awareness around the program as well. One of the biggest things that I want to mention here is that behavior change is one of the biggest pieces to any successful food waste diversion program. And behavior change in our program, we have tactics that focus on all facets of the behavior change, which is a mix of improving awareness around the desired behavior, the opportunity to make it easy to choose the desired behavior, and 3 is providing motivation around why to choose the desired behavior. So we utilized a lot of behavior change techniques when rolling out this program in particular, such as altering the environment to enable the behavior, recruiting early adopters. We had a green ambassadors program. We got leadership engaged. We asked for personal testimonials of folks who maybe learned something new about the program or saw their behaviors changing, or during COVID, we asked them to share things around if they composted at home, why they did that, so on and so forth. Gamified it, had a lot of different events and incentives. Educating was obviously a huge piece, utilizing multiple channels because not everyone checks their email in the same way. So having a lot of visuals there. We also, in terms of education around COVID, we hosted a couple of webinars on the safety of waste diversion in the face of COVID. One of which was we brought in CDC experts, both an infectious disease expert, Ben Loughlin, and a behavioral science expert, Dr. Christine Prue, to discuss reusables in particular, we don't have a video of that yet on our website, but we will. We do have a COVID resources page that Rebecca also linked into the chat, so you can check out some more fodder if your organization is running into sort of the COVID argument for ways to continue sustainable waste management practices. We also shared small wins and successes to get those positive feelings flowing. The data was huge there as well. And inviting input to make sure that the system works for most everyone, not catering to all of the squeaky wheels, which we could talk about all day. So these are some resources and communications that we put together, the variety of methods for raising awareness and for offering opportunities for engagement, digital screens, lobby posters, internet, email, so on and so forth. And then based on the input and frequently asked questions, we created some short fun videos to help answer some of those frequently asked questions in a fun way. So, that was a lot. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to dive into more details in the discussion, and I'll pass back to Alec.
Great, thank you, Jack. A lot of information there. We've had a number of questions, lots of great chat going on, so please keep that going. It's great to see some of the questions and the points that are being made. And again, just a reminder, if you have a question specifically that you want this panelist to address, be sure to drop that into the Q&A field separate from the chat. Let's go ahead and open up our next poll question. So at what stage of development is your food waste collection program at? So again, assuming that you're working with an active program, are you still in the planning pilot stage? You started to implement, but you're still, still lots of room to expand and build on that. Do you have a comprehensive program? While folks are responding to that, Jack, we had a couple of questions come in about the ROI, the economics of this, and obviously this really depends on the facility. There are a lot of factors that go into it, and on an economic basis, it's not always going to pan out as it's an actual economic model. But can you talk a little bit about the customer that you worked with, and what were some of the factors that drove their decision and how they were evaluating in ROI?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different benefits to having a program like this. Some of them can be economic. Honestly, a lot of the economic benefits that you'll see is when you shift from reducing waste in some way, shape, or form. So when they invested in reusables, reuse wins when it comes to cost, because it just reduces the price that they would have to purchase for compostables, which are very expensive, or can be expensive. So if you focus your program mostly on reduction, then you can see the ROI happen over time. But a lot of what we discuss with our program and with our clients is think about how important is brand reputation and brand recognition to you. How much does your marketing department pay for ads in order to help improve or potentially bring in new clients, new customers, new types of employees even? There's a lot of benefit to having a program like this that is not necessarily directly related to ROI. However, if you think about it in terms of the benefits of this program, then we've had certain clients that actually split up the cost of the program itself, half in operations or facilities, and half was the marketing department, because they saw the benefit that this data would provide, that all of these resources would provide. And if they did reach zero waste, if they could definitively say, like, we provide through footprint tracks, we provide that evidence of proof of, here's the data, look at how far they've gone. This is your diversion. This is how much metric tons of carbon dioxide you're taking out of the atmosphere by doing what you're doing. So they found value in doing that, and they just considered that a different tactic for marketing. So I think it depends on every business, whatever your drivers are and whatever your values are. But the return on investment is pretty clear in a lot of different ways. Perhaps not economic right away, but yeah, I would love to talk with whoever has more questions about that. Definitely feel free to shoot me an email.
Great, thanks. Let's go ahead and close the poll then. So again, it looks like the same, about 26% of folks don't have a current program, but it looks like of those who do, a good solid majority, 40% or more, have a well-established or comprehensive program. So so that's great to see. I think, again, this is something I think if we had asked this question 5 years ago, it would have been a much smaller number. So it's great to see how local programs are evolving. Let's go ahead and turn that off, and then let's move on to our next speaker. We have a returning. This is actually the second time we've had Abby join one of our programs, but please welcome Abby Massaro. with Center for Ecotechnology, and you should have control of the cursor to move your slides. Go ahead, Abby.
Thank you so much, Alec. Yes, thanks for having me back. I'm so happy to be here today and participating with all these fabulous speakers and a really engaging audience. So yes, I'm Abby. I'm here on behalf of the Center for Ecotechnology, or CET for short, and the Recycling Works in Massachusetts program. CET is an environmental nonprofit that's located in Massachusetts, and we help people and businesses across the country reduce waste and conserve energy. We implement and strengthen waste reduction, recycling, and food waste diversion programs for businesses and institutions of all different sizes. But CET has really been a leader in the commercial food waste space for over 20 years. And much of our experience and resources that we've developed are due to us administering the Recycling Works in Massachusetts program, which we will get into in just a second. So this is a map snapshot taken from our Wasted Food Solutions website, where you can click on the color-coded states and find specific wasted food resources. So for example, if your state has a regulatory requirement for diverting food material from the trash, as several states do, you can find that information here. So as I mentioned, Recycling Works in Massachusetts is a recycling assistance program that provides free assistance to help businesses and institutions maximize recycling, reuse, and food waste diversion opportunities. Any material that a business generates in Massachusetts, for example, cardboard, single-stream recycling, construction and demolition materials, surplus food for donation, and food scraps for composting, anaerobic digestion, or animal feed, which we'll get into in just a moment. We provide the technical assistance that's needed to help develop new or strengthen existing waste management programs. And this program is funded by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, also known as the Mass DEP, and is delivered under contract by CET. Our program provides Massachusetts businesses the support that they need to comply with the Massachusetts waste bans and then go beyond compliance to maximize waste diversion. So any material that is on the Mass DEP's list of waste bans cannot be placed in the trash. And the Mass DEP has implemented waste bans on hazardous, recyclable, and compostable materials. These bans help the state reach its waste diversion goals and help further develop these end markets. And this is just an abbreviated list, and you can access the full list going to the link at the bottom of this slide, and also Rebecca has thrown it into the chat. And some waste bans, a lot of businesses are surprised to learn, like cardboard, have actually been in place since the 1990s, and then materials have been added over time, such as commercial food waste. So in 2014, the Mass DEP implemented a waste disposal ban on any commercial business that generates 1 ton or more of food waste per week must find an alternative to throwing it in the trash. So that includes the food recovery hierarchy that Alex mentioned previously of number 1, prevention, number 2, food for donation, and then diverting your food scraps to a different outlet other than the trash. And in the 2020-2030 Solid Waste Master Plan, the Mass DEP is reducing the threshold of 1 ton or more of food waste per week to 1/2 a ton of food waste per week in November 2022. So that is going to encompass many more businesses and institutions than it does currently. And in addition to that, the Mass DEP is also adding mattresses and textiles to this list. So right now, Recycling Works is really conducting a lot of outreach to businesses to help inform them about the waste bans. And that's really where Recycling Works was sort of born, is to help businesses comply with the waste bans and provide them the technical assistance needed to really maximize their programs or start something new. And I do want to mention, segueing into our next section here, that food and compostable materials that are placed in their bins on office floors or in cafeterias or in break rooms, they don't just disappear, right? Against popular belief of some of the people that might not be as intimately involved as some of our sustainability professionals here today with the waste program. But our material movers or janitors then move the material to the dumpster's cart or compactor where they await pickup by a hauler. And then from that location, food scraps and compostables are brought to typically 3 main outlets, which we'll get into, but it's really important to note and educate your staff on this actually goes somewhere. So we'll start off with animal feed. So is that exactly what it sounds like, sending your food scraps to a animal feed operation. These end sites typically have very low tolerance for contamination of non-food items. So don't want the pigs or cows or whatever livestock that farmers are feeding to have to pick around, plastic forks and straws and things like that. And next we have commercial compost sites. So natural decomposition of organic materials. We can do this at home. Also, there are commercial operations out there. They can often accept compostable fibers and bioplastics, but as we've seen and then shared in the chat, always check with your hauler before making any changes to your serviceware program. Not all compost sites will act the same and have the same restrictions here regarding what they will and will not accept. So always ask your hauler about what they will and will not accept there. And similarly, all of these sites have different capacities for addressing physical contamination. Sorry, I forgot to double click there. There's the various options of commercial compost sites here. And next we have anaerobic digestion. It's actually most common to have depackaging infrastructure with coupled with anaerobic digestion sites. Anaerobic digestion, also known as AD facilities, rely on microorganisms to break down organic material in the absence of oxygen in a sealed vessel, which then outputs are mainly digestate and a biogas, which can be used to create energy. So definitely not a good place to send your compostable ware, as with depackaging infrastructure will just pull out all of that as contamination. So I want to emphasize, and I think we have a great panel on here today that will really hit some of these points home as well and further in the discussion, but every situation is unique. Conducting that audit or assessment of your building's bins can help you identify what's divertible and then develop a plan for those materials. You might be hearing this a lot today, that we can't emphasize enough clear and detailed signage, color-coded bins is a really important step when implementing or strengthening any new waste program. This is I can't mention the name because it's a governmental facility, but this is a waste station taken from their cafeteria. And you'll see that they even went as far as adding color-coded arrows to really nail the point home that this material that you see in your shadow box goes right below into the color-coded opening down below. So they even had waste watchers or members of their green team stand next to the waste stations during really high volume times of the day and to help answer any questions that staff had about sorting materials and where they go. And a big misconception with starting these programs in offices and really any business is that you're collecting more material, but that's really not the case. It is really the same amount of material just being separated out into a different collection bin. And I'm going to review our office case study at CET. We have an office relatively small of about 50 staff members, but we collected food waste from our office lunches, our events, and even paper towels for composting. Compost was transferred outside to storage containers by our contracted cleaning service twice per week to minimize odor and pests. And that's the schedule that worked the best for us. Again, every situation is unique. And we used compostable bags to line bins inside of our facility that were used to collect food scraps, and also the outdoor collection bins, as we confirmed that our commercial composter, where our food scraps ended up, accepted those compostable bags. Also, new employees are taken on a physical tour of our building to be shown what waste are collected where and what to and what not to include. And also we have detailed waste bin signage that you can see on the bubble to the left and right here. And in 2019, we conducted one of these audits to identify opportunities to improve our program and made updates to our waste bin signage to include a few more details and to hopefully reduce contamination, which it did. And we spoke to our hauler and contracted cleaning service to learn where we could improve from them, the real material movers, right? And they suggested that we right-size our equipment by reducing the size of our trash container and increasing the size of our recycling container to allow for that shift in material collected. And one last point here on this case study is that we actually color-coded our indoor collection containers to match our outdoor containers. So cleaning crews were taking a green bag out of a green bin or a green labeled bin and then move the material into an outdoor collection container that was also green. And I will end here on different systems that you might come across that might work the best for you. You can maybe utilize a kitchen top container, which is pictured on the left here, or maybe you also collect bulkier compostable and compostable papers too, pizza boxes and such, and you'll need a larger waste station. It really depends on what material you have in your facilities. That's why doing an audit can help with this, and we can get more into this during our discussion, but I will just end by sharing that CET offers free consultation to office buildings, manufacturers, amusement parks, restaurants, cafeterias, you name it. We've worked with it and likely have a case study on it. So you can check out our website to learn more. So that's all I have. I'll turn it back over to you, Alec.
Great. Thank you, Abby. That was fantastic. A lot's going on. Let's go ahead and take the next we have one more, or we have two more poll questions. So for this one, what is the #1 roadblock and barrier that your program faces? So again, assuming that you are with an active program, we know there are a lot of challenges, and so is it lack of leadership? Is it issues or perceptions? Multiple of these may apply, but for this purpose, answer just the sort of the very specific one that's probably the #1 challenge that you're facing. And for Abby, we haven't, I don't think I saw any questions that have come in yet, but could you talk a little bit about Massachusetts? I mentioned in my opening that there's been legislation passed in both Massachusetts and California. I know you're in Massachusetts. Could you just talk a little bit about that law, what exactly it's covering and how that applies to local businesses, communities, what they need to know from a high level?
Sure. So various materials on the list of waste bans, and the biggest thing is that the changes are coming in 2022. We have a website with several resources that you can check out if you are looking to begin one of those programs. And of course, if you're located in Massachusetts, you can call the Recycling Works hotline or email to learn more and ask for our on-site or virtual technical assistance. But essentially, the Mass DEP conducts waste ban inspections at solid waste facilities in our state. So you will receive a communication if you are a commercial entity that is observed. They do incoming load inspections essentially. So they will check for these waste ban materials in your trash. And you as a business and your waste hauler share a responsibility for complying with the waste ban. And yeah, I could really ramble on about it for a while, but I'm happy to answer any other questions during the discussion or offline. And I will also note that you cannot arrange for disposal. You cannot dispose of these materials in Massachusetts, and you cannot arrange for disposal to dispose of them outside of the state. And California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Vermont all have passed laws to keep food out of landfills. So it seems like the direction that we are headed as a country. And CET also has created an organics waste ban toolkit. So I can throw that in the chat if you would like to take a look at that to help your state develop something like this.
Great, thank you. And for this program, we're not diving too deep into the state-specific requirements or aspects of those laws, simply because this is our audience is Canadian and U.S. wide. But there definitely is, as Abby referred, there are a lot of resources that are specific to the states where and the ins and outs of those particular laws, as well as some of the resources. In addition to Massachusetts, California is the other big one. I know we have a lot of folks here who've logged in from California. On the California side, I'll specifically point out that there are CalRecycle has an excellent website that has the full breakdown of what the requirements are of the California law. And also there was a conference that took place last year that was organized by the California Resource Recovery Association that was dedicated entirely to the SB 1383 law. And so for folks who are interested, who are in California, really want to learn more about the particulars of that, as well as some of the case studies and resources available, we'll be putting again into the resources, but there is a website where you can find all of the archived presentations from that conference that was dedicated to that topic. I'll also point out that we are recording this program, so the recording of these slides will be available online. Also, all of the resources that we're dropping into the chat will also be set up on a web page. So within the next day or two, we'll send out an email to everybody registered that'll point you to where you can find all these resources that we're talking about here. So real quickly then, just to back to the poll, looks like not surprisingly, contamination, lack of participation is the #1 issue, with almost 40% of people responding to that. And just the lack of infrastructure, not having collections service providers, processors was another significant. So thanks for sharing those. And so we're gonna move on then. We have one more presentation. Abby, 1 second, let me take control of the cursor again, and I'm gonna hand it to Heather, and I'm gonna move over to our last slide. So we have, as our last speaker, we have Heather Cashwell from North Carolina State University, who's going to give us a case study about what they've been doing at her institution. And Heather, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, and thanks so much for having us. And thanks to everyone on this call. This chat and Q&A is the most on fire. It feels like we're in person, so thank you for making this feel like that. I am Heather Cashwell. I'm from NC State University. We do have a comprehensive organics management program at the university. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the highlights of those collections today. And the first slide here is a picture of our own processing site that we built and started operating in 2019. So we're really excited to have our own processing ability as well. And it's given us a lot of insight on our collection programs. And so let's see if that's going to work, Alec. Alec, did you give me control, or can you move to the next slide? Awesome. Okay, this is just a little bit about NC State. We are located in the capital of North Carolina, Raleigh. We have a campus population of about 45,000 on a normal day, plus visitors. And our office, the Office of Waste Reduction and Recycling, operates all of the collections and hauling of compost, recycling, landfill materials on campus. We do all that in-house. And we also operate a convenience site and a drop-off for multi-materials. We have a roll-off business, and we also operate the compost facility like we talked about. Next slide, please. This is just a quick look at some of our dashboard data, but kind of where we are and where we want to go as a university. Our university has adopted a 70% diversion from landfill goal. We're supposed to achieve that this year by 2022. And you can kind of see a snapshot of where we're at. So I included the last several years here because, as you all know, tracking data through the pandemic has its own challenges. But we have creeped up, from the low 50s to the mid 50% diversion rate over the last few years. This last fiscal year, we saw a 61% diversion rate, and we have continued to implement programs, especially with organics, throughout the pandemic. So we hope that in part that's because of all these new programs we're putting in place, but we will see as we continue to monitor this moving forward and campus returns to a more normal situation. But this pie chart shows our last large-scale waste characterization study that we did in 2015. We've done some smaller scale ones since then, but this was our last big one. And the main takeaway from this, especially as it pertains to this webinar, is that big green swath that you see, and that is that 38% of our material on campus was compostable. And we had some programs already in place to manage organics, but this really kind of motivated us in some new and important ways. So you can go to the next slide, please. So, just to mention, we talked a little bit about the hierarchy today and the importance of source reduction and reusables. And I did want to point out that on campus, we do have some really important programs that talk about or that address food recovery, donations, source reduction. We have some reusable programs on campus. But today we're going to walk through some of these examples of collections that we have for organics on campus. And this just gives you a snapshot of all the diverse types of buildings that we do have organics collection from. And we are in about a little bit shy of a quarter of our buildings with organics programs right now. And we'd really love to see universal access on campus as we go forward. Next slide, please. So we'll just walk through some of these. This is a shot at some of our athletics collection programs. We started with football and our Zero Waste Wolfpack program in 2015. We use volunteers to help man compost stations around the stadium and work with the vendors to do some back of house collections from the boxes. Typically in a pre-pandemic year, it's a really robust program. It collects a lot of organics, about 17,000 pounds per game. I think Paula had mentioned one of her biggest barriers right now is staffing challenges. And boy, did we see that this year with athletics and some of the vendors that they were using. So we saw the amount that we collected really plummet as they struggled with some staffing issues. We're hoping that right sizes over time. I should also mention that this athletics program has grown past football. We're now at every soccer game, men and women's. We're at some other sports like our big track and field event, and we're trying to get more and more into athletics. Next slide, please. We also support events on campus with these Clearstream containers. We work with event organizers, whether they're doing like a giant community shut down the street type of festival to a small student gathering. We provide these containers and bags, pick up the material for them and get it to the right place. And we work with event organizers to really understand what type of event they're having, what type of food they're providing, and in what type of format. And what we found is that a lot of times they were trying to be proactive and ordering compostables that ended up not being compostable. They had some of those claims like Gary mentioned, like biodegradable. And so what we started to do was just to buy these products in bulk and make them available at cost for event organizers. And that has gone really well. Next slide, please. Residence halls has been a program we've had in place for many years, but it has been evolving over time. So back in 2015, it started with that pizza box composting program, which as you can imagine, we have a lot of pizza boxes on campus. That was wildly successful. The next year, we sort of expanded it to a voluntary opt-in. You can get a compost jar or pail and keep it in your room and use those dumpsters. Good program, although has a very low adoption rate. And so that's something that we were interested in growing. And we'll talk about that next on the next slide. Paper towel composting is something that we've seen in the last couple of years come online in residence halls as a student-led initiative. So our last 2019 audit, we were really looking into residence halls, and it became clear that in these traditional residence halls with paper towels, 18% of the landfill material was paper towels. So the students started this program to collect paper towels, try to get more of those diverted to compost. And we're hoping that at some point this can become an institutionalized program and be in every bathroom in residence halls. Next slide, please. That waste audit that I mentioned in 2019, the other large eye-opener for us was that we wanted to look at the difference in waste coming out of our apartment style residences versus the traditional ones. And one of the main differences is they have a full-size kitchen in the apartments. And what we found was that almost 39% of the waste coming out of the apartments was food waste alone, just food, compared to 1.7% in the traditional residence halls. So that gave us a lot of great information that we needed to prioritize and focus our organics diversion on the apartments and not the traditional residence hall style buildings. So 2.5 years ago, we worked with housing and the county to start a grant-funded project to roll out in-room apartment composting at 2 of the 4 apartments. You can see that program that went into place. We gave them a pail, information, magnet. We did a lot of monitoring around contamination and did some pretty targeted and specific outreach that made some great improvements. Since then, student government has really taken an interest in growing this, and they funded the expansion to the other portions of the other 2 apartments. And so this is still an emerging thing. If you've ever worked on multifamily or apartment recycling or composting, you know it's super hard. And so we're trying new things. We're doing surveys with the residents of these apartments to see what they do and don't like, what would get them to increase participation. So I think there was a couple of folks that mentioned participation as one of their barriers as well. So we really want to try to see, now that we've made this automatic, it's not an opt-in voluntary program, this bin comes with your room, how do we still make sure that you're participating and participating correctly? Next slide, please. So this is just a quick look at some of our indoor dining collections. We have worked with dining. They were our first early adopter, but back of house, staff driven type of programs. And they've slowly marched that out into the front of the house in some of our eateries and dining locations across campus. And I think we're going to get to talk about this later, but these type of locations offer so much potential, but definitely some of the biggest challenges. This is where most of our contamination comes from. The types of packaging and the mix between compostable and non-compostable and not recyclable and recyclable, it's just super confusing. So this is a kind of a challenge area, but one that we think has a lot of potential. Next slide, please. And then just a shot at outdoor dining. So, during the pandemic, we did see a lot of dining move outside. People wanted to be outside to eat. And so as a university, we put up large tents with picnic tables. We tried to move, seating outside so that people could feel safe eating out there. And this is just 2 examples of those locations. The left-hand side is some containers that we built. This was a pretty quick transition, as you can imagine. So we built those containers in-house, and it allowed us to be flexible with the signs. Dining was having some supply chain issues at the time, like really unsure about sourcing. And so we had to change those signs around a lot, but we tried to keep it consistent with the color and the messaging to the degree that we could. Next slide, please. And this is a look at one of our keystone programs, and that's our Zero Waste Workplace program. This is how we want every building on campus to look like. If it's an academic space or an office, we want it to have this set up. We're a long way from there, but that's where we're going. It's neat, it's clean, it's branded, it sends the message. And the most important thing is moving to this type of system has shown some pretty oh no. Oh, sorry, I think I'm back. Some good increases in the amount of diversion that we're seeing from these types of buildings. So in this type of program, we go in, we take out everybody's random trash cans that they have all over the place. We stack them up, we remove them hopefully in the dead of the night where no one can claim them. And then we replace them with these bins that go at their desk. The person at the desk is responsible for taking them to these central sites. The trash can is very tiny. The recycling bin is very big. It comes with a compost bin. And also part of this program is the image on the right, which is our paper towel composting programs in bathrooms. And that has worked everywhere we put it. We consistently get good, clean materials from these locations, despite what maybe I thought at the beginning of this, but that works everywhere we put it. So Zero Waste Workplace is a really important program for us. We're trying to grow it as fast as we can. Next slide. And we've talked about a lot of challenges. We do have some challenges in terms of resources and funding to try to expand out to get a thrinned bin system instead of a twin bin where we have trash and recycling. We want compost everywhere. We want 3 bins everywhere on campus. That's a resource challenge for us. We're trying to prioritize where we're putting them to get the most bang for our buck. But another giant challenge that we have that everybody has is contamination. And so next slide. Those are some pictures from our compost facility where you can really see it up close. But we do have a comprehensive outreach and education program that tries to address some of these things. It runs the gamut from the traditional, training with staff and students, tabling, virtual type of programming, website, social media, signage, all of that stuff, to new employee orientation training that we've gotten in there now in the last couple of years to try to really help people sort their stuff. Next slide, please. But the sort of the main message and the main narrative that we are trying to create and that we found to be most successful is this closed loop narrative that we're lucky to have on campus, and to really engage people in our facility and our site, and to show them what happens with the material and how it's composted, and that if you put it in the packaging, that packaging is still going to be there at the end of it. And so this is the type of story that, you generate this material on campus, it's collected on campus, we haul it, our staff hauls it to our own facility, we process it there, and then we take it to a campus farm where that helps grow food that's then brought back to the dining halls, and that cycle repeats. And the more that we can tell this story, the more we've just realized that people are really engaging and they have a sense of ownership and the success of our facility, and they take that extra moment. And it's just a challenge of like, how can we get this in front of everybody at the university? We do a ton of tours. They get to be up close and personal and really understand the process. But that's the narrative that we're leading with now. And we feel like it's really starting to make a difference in how this facility is resonating with our campus community. And the last slide, Alec, is just our contact information. Adam and Matt are the guys who make this thing go, and we'd always be happy to talk with you if you're in our area. If you want to travel, we'd love to come show you our site and some of our collection programs. And thanks again for having us.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Lots of great information there. And we have lots of questions coming in. We will get to as many of them as we can. Let me just introduce, we have one last live poll question. Let me throw this out here. How significant an issue is contamination? So roughly 40% of folks said on the last poll that this was their main problem. And so trying to get a sense of how significant this is for different types of facilities. And while folks are responding to that, Heather, a couple questions came in. One, you mentioned having to do targeted outreach for areas where there was trouble, where you were seeing problems with contamination. Can you talk about how exactly did you reach out and try to address those specific problems? Was it by email or how?
Yeah, it's like a full court press of options, depending on the situation. So one of the most important things that we have the ability to do is look at it when it comes to our facility. So Matt, the operator, looks at every load that comes off the truck. Sometimes it's kind of obvious where the material is coming from. And sometimes, especially when we marry that with our route data, so we can tell where we picked up that day. And we can tell this is back of house dining waste, or this is the wrong bag it's a black trash bag full with trash in the compost. We did not hit any residential routes today. That's not a residential bag. We think we need to train the housekeepers. And so depending on where we think the waste is, or the trash is, contamination is coming from, we will do outreach, whether it's an email. A lot of times what we'd really rather do is go in person and do a training. And we talked about staffing a little. The staffing turnover right now, I mean, it's always been high, but right now it's even higher. And so retraining is just a constant thing that we have to do. So where we can identify the source or have a good sense for it, we take pictures, we show them, we go and do in-person training. We always offer the compost facility up to them as an option to come out and see. That's always been really impactful. And when we can't, figure out where it's coming from, we try to use that into some targeted generic outreach for the campus community. Like if we see a big bunch of cups, like at the beginning of the semester and everything, one thinks a paper cup is compostable, even if it's not, how can we do some targeted outreach around that? So we try to keep as many eyes as we can on the material and, try to get that information to the right people.
Awesome. Great. And then just one other really quick question for you that came in, tracking software. How do you track? Is there a specific platform you use?
Are we talking about tracking for
data? I think waste data in general, but also organics.
So we do kind of we're a little bit obsessed with data. But we kind of use our own Excel tracking form and a process that we've done to get that annual diversion number. We do a lot of, since we do our own hauling, we definitely have access to all of the weight data. We put that in there, and then we try to gather information from projects on campus and reuse efforts about their diversion. So we don't manage every diversion program, but we know who does and try to reach out to them and get their own data and include that in our annual numbers. We also have installed some scales on our trucks. We don't have them on all of them yet, but the 2 that we do have on our 5 trucks have been really successful. And so the goal would be to get them on every truck. And that way we have really specific building data as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Great. Let's go ahead and poll if we can pull up the results up on the screen for folks to see. So looks like, again, not surprising, but a good almost 40% of people are saying that contamination is a significant issue, and that another 10% say it's a critical. It actually threatens the viability of the program. So we know this is a big problem, and one we'll touch on some more as we move into the panel discussion. So with that, we are, if I can ask all of our presenters to go ahead and turn on your screens. I'm going to shut off the slides, and let's take some, let's talk some more about some of the questions that have come in and some of the different topics. So loosely, for the time we have about 15 minutes. We sort of divided this as we were preparing for the panel around, what are some of the aspects to advanced planning, to actually implementing a program, talking about some of the operational issues involved, and then behavior is obviously a big piece of it. And just to kick things off, let me throw out a question on the advanced planning. Several of you have talked about waste audits and how that can inform. I guess, Jack, do you mind taking the first question and just talk a little bit about how do you prioritize? If you are starting from scratch and you're trying to figure out that there are lots of different types of initiatives you could do, how do you go about prioritizing? What is it that you get from waste audits and other steps that can help to inform that process?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I think it would depend on the type of business. Obviously, a restaurant that we would deal with is very different from a hotel, is very different from an office space. But how to prioritize quickly, I would say. Like we do in-depth waste audits of all different types of streams. So then you can get a very deep dive into this type of waste, this type of contamination is present within this type of area. And then it can provide a very comprehensive list of action items for top priorities to reach a certain diversion, or to see this is the biggest contamination item that we have throughout the entire building. So we want to focus on finding an alternative for that, X, Y, and Z. But I would say you could do spot audits one at a time, thinking through, just writing down it. I would say the first step would be a great engagement with a lot of stakeholders within the business, operations, facilities, purchasing, and food and beverage. If you have either that cafe, again, it depends on the client, but sort of having a discussion where you ask what others see, and then doing a quick deep dive into spot audits around the building and gathering little bits and pieces from there. But starting with a pilot will be super helpful in determining where things are the biggest issues. But again, I'll also mention that the free scorecard that is on our website asks pretty quick questions that gives some top priority items of, okay, we think that your biggest bang for your buck would be to implement signage, or to have color coding, or to, start throughout various quick wins.
Mm-hmm. Great. Heather or Abby, Gary, feel free to jump in if you have anything you want to add to that in terms of sort of prioritizing and what the first steps are.
Yeah, I just would like to add real quickly. I agree with everything Jack said. It's very important to understand your waste stream. Some people just don't know. They're all so used to throwing everything into one bin, they just really don't understand. You're never going to really be able to quantify what you can divert from landfill until you understand the waste stream that you're generating. And by understanding the waste that you're generating, it allows you internally as an organization, a company, facility, whatever you are, to be able to then modify your purchasing processes to where you are trying to purchase more packaging, say, that's recyclable or compostable, more food service items that are compostable. It gives you the ability to dramatically reduce the amount of waste that you're generating and then increase the diversion numbers. So it's very important. It's key and critical to make sure you understand your waste stream. We're not asking anybody to go dumpster diving. You can typically do it by just looking through your areas and where your waste collection bins are to kind of get a good understanding for it. But it is very, very vital to making a program successful.
Yep.
Jump into, we've hit the point home of like conducting this audit can really give you that baseline understanding of where waste is generated and what your office or facility is actually producing. There's third parties you can hire. There are free guides online through LeanPath. The EPA has a great one as well. Consider where this organic material is being generated and how it fluctuates throughout the time of year, the time of day. Recycling Works has a food waste estimation guide that you can use for various sectors to be able to tell you or give you a better estimate of how much food waste you may be generating. So that will be popped in the chat soon. And just to touch on, again, what Jack mentioned about facilities or janitorial crew, they are really a treasure trove of information of like, this bin on floor 32 and the corner of this break room, is always full. It's always overflowing with food waste. We need another bin, whatever it might be. Our recycling's always contaminated with chip bags. Can you please educate staff on like no more chip bags? And they're really the decision makers when it comes to determining what should or should not actually go in the recycling bin or in the compost bin if something's too contaminated. So that's something to discover with your hauler, that level of contamination should be determined before that. But I'd start with them. They are fantastic. Whenever we conduct audits, we always have them.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. Definitely having them at the table will help not only in understanding what the issues are, but also helping get them involved and motivated behind, because they're the ones that are also going to be doing the changes. They're going to be collecting things out of multiple bins in a different way, bringing them to different parts of the building. So getting their voice involved and making them feel like this is a part of that they feel proud that this is a part of their program too, and that they got to give input is huge in creating and keeping a successful program. It's a great point, Abby.
Yeah. And Abby, the spark of thought, that's something you mentioned when we had our prep conversation about other stakeholders, in addition to the haulers, consulting, talking with the housekeepers, with custodial, the folks who are doing the actual collections. They can be a huge source of insight. And oftentimes we don't think to talk with them, but they are the eyes and the ears on the ground, and simply their observations of what's working, what isn't. They know what's showing up in the wrong bins. So they're a great constituency who can be a great resource. So
Alec, if I may too, a couple of the questions that came in the chat in the Q&A was in regards to how do you deal with having to add additional bins if you have a unionized custodial staff that you're dealing with. And it is vitally important that you get them involved early on, because you may have some issues with your contracts with those unionized custodial teams to make sure that they're on board with everything that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to keep moving for the time we have, there's been a number of things in the comments. I know this is a big question for a lot of folks, but the decision, do you start using compostable serviceware in the first place? Are there situations where it makes sense, situations that don't? And the confusion just over on that packaging can be a real concern. Does anybody want to, that's kind of a big question, but does anybody want to jump in with thoughts on how to go about the thought process? Is this a direction to go? Is this not? Does anybody want to field that one?
I don't mind jumping in real quick just to say, obviously, we want you using compostable bags. That helps keep the program clean, helps keep the whole process moving forward. But I do think it is something that trying to get all your different vendors and all your different, maybe you're in like a Coliseum or a stadium or something like that, and you have a lot of different people bringing materials in from outside. Trying to get all of those vendors and all of those people on board with bringing in only compostable and or recyclable materials all at once is a tremendous ask. So it is always easier, we believe, by saying, let's start with the stuff that we know we can do. So start with the food waste, start with the front of house, back of house separation of the food materials, and then we'll move into all the compostable products.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just add that we should always encourage reusables. I think for many reasons, that should be the first step. And there's some states that are backing away from accepting compostables. I mean, we had somebody from Vermont on the webinar that kind of shared that. And that's for a reason. It's confusing to the public. There's a lot of products that have labeling that's confusing. And I know BPI is trying to address that, and some of these organizations trying to make it easier for people. But the same challenges we've had with recycling and confusion, we're going to have, with compostables. And so, just to share quickly with our campus enterprises and dining who operate our student centers, they have multiple different eateries, multiple different purchase points. A few years ago, they went and took the step to move to a compostable Coke cup, and that was for fountain drinks at the student union. It's great, like that's a great step, and it came at a cost to them, but they were willing to kind of have, like, you're talking about ROI. Sometimes it's not about dollars. Sometimes it's about students want this. This is a reason they choose to come to our university. We want to provide this option for them to be a low waste university. So that's great in some ways, and it's kind of like a chicken and the egg. Where does it all start? Where does it all end? Because in the meantime, we've kind of taken these incremental steps to add more composting, but until you're all one way or another, you're going to live in confusion land. And that's where we are right now. And so I don't, sometimes I wish that we didn't have them. And sometimes I wish we could just move more quickly to have them all or not. But I don't know if you can unless you're just like really fortunate with resources, you might not be in a situation where you can go all compostables. So maybe you can, like, can you go all cups and say all the cups in here are compostable and don't worry about the utensils or something like that, where you can take these baby steps. So I think it depends on the situation. You got to start somewhere, but it makes it hard.
But a big part of that is simplicity. You need a system that can be intuitive and people can wrap their heads around understanding that people are not going to get a PhD in how to sort any more than they do with recycling. So how can you come up with a system that's going to be as uniform and easy to communicate as possible? And if that means you go all one or all the other, I think that is a big factor that the folks need to think through.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could just add, I threw into the chat a great resource from Upstream Solutions. They created they're all about reusables. I am all about reusables. I find compostables to be just so entirely confusing. And like you said, Alec, we're not all going to go to school to figure out what the material is and whether or not this plastic looking type of material is actually plastic or what type of material it's made from and where it can go. When I was working in Vermont, the Chittenden landfill, or the landfill in Chittenden County area, they did a study on the compostable products that could or could not be broken down in their industrial sized composting facility, and found that with some, even though it's considered compostable, it's really not useful to the compost pile. And so many places don't take it because it would only break down at temperatures that are so high that it actually kills the beneficial microorganisms that are required for actually doing the composting. So in a lot of ways, I think reusables is definitely the way to go. It just feels different, and it actually increases user experience depending on what your business is. If it's a restaurant or if it's a cafe, it just feels nicer to drink coffee out of a mug instead of like, a paper cup. And so in a lot of ways, it is something that has already been ingrained in our minds from how we grew up. Granted, my parents still use paper plates at home, regardless of what I do with my life, but it's something that is a different step that you would take. And just, I think in general, trying to go as much to the reusables instead of, like Heather, you said, maybe just do all cups compostable. Like I would even venture to challenge us to say, maybe let's do all reusable cups and then keep all of the other purchasing the same and think through how to slowly integrate more reusable options instead of other types of disposables.
Yeah, a number of folks put into the chat or put in questions of, if there's nobody who will accept that compostable packaging. And that's just a reality, is that it does not break down in all situations. And it is, just to reiterate the point made, it's critical if you're thinking to go in that direction, make sure you're talking to your hauler, who the end provider is, and make sure this is something not just conceptually they can take, but they actually are able to take the specific items that you have, because different products will work different. Mm-hmm. We're running out of time. I do want to take a few minutes just to talk about odors and pests, because I think this is the big one. Whether it's in reality or if it's the perceptions, it almost kind of doesn't matter to some extent, because you need to have a system that the people are confident in. Does anybody want to talk about just that from a collection perspective, and maybe not even so much the dining, but it's more offices and others, and any sage words of wisdom on how to deal with the issue of odor and pests, but also the perceptions.
So if I may, Alec, I'll just real quickly jump in. Sorry, Abby. One of the things that I tell all of our end customers and a lot of our distributor reps that are out there selling our products is, we're not, again, I said it in my presentation, we're not telling you to generate anything different than what you're generating today. If you think about it today, with all of your plastics and some of the stuff that goes into your trash can, take, for example, your 13-gallon kitchen trash bin at home. If you're putting all your food waste in there as well as all your other trash, you don't want that thing sitting in your kitchen for days and days and days, starting to smell, starting to make your house smell. So you empty that bag, you take it outside, you put it in your outside bin for collection. If you're separating out your compostables from your regular trash, instead of maybe generating 2 or 3 or 4 bags a week, maybe you're only generating 1, because you're taking all that stinky stuff that you really wanted to get out of there. I mean, the plastic bottle or the whatever you have in there, or the leftover aluminum foil or whatever, it's really not what's smelling. It's the food waste that you're putting in there. So we have found that you'll dramatically reduce the cost of what you're buying in trash bags by separating out your food waste and your compostables. And typically, in most cases that I've seen, the collection process for collecting up the compostables, the organics, is usually more frequent than that of just the trash. So your outdoor bins as well are not sitting there without all that stuff rotting and smelling and stinking in your big trash bin.
In the summer months, it's really frequent for many businesses to increase the frequency of pickup of anything. If it's your trash container that has food waste in it, or if it's your compost container. And we've seen, depending on where your food waste goes, adding wood chips to your outdoor collection may eliminate smell and pests, but it's really making sure your container, even if it's lined with something, a compostable bag, whatever, washing that frequently. Always have it on a washing schedule, or talk to your hauler when you're negotiating your contract about who's maintaining that equipment and that cleanliness aspect.
Mm-hmm. Great. I will jump in with my own observation or something I saw that I thought was really an interesting approach a couple years ago, and that's from University of Colorado Boulder. They've gone to a system where they for offices, they have collection bins in the bathroom for organics, where they combine it with, similar to what Heather talked about, collecting the paper towels. And the theory is that there's a greater tolerance for odors in the bathroom to the extent that they exist, or its perception. There's going to be a greater tolerance there. And also by combining it with the paper towels, it also gets to what you just mentioned, Abby. You're adding a source of carbon. Instead of wood chips, it is the paper towels that helps to soak up the moisture, and that could help to reduce that as well. So another approach. We have lots of questions and lots we could cover. I wish we had another hour to go. Unfortunately, we don't. I will be working with our presenters after the program. We will go through the questions that have come in that we've not been able to answer, and where we're able to write out some specific responses to some of the questions, we'll do that, and we'll post those online. And then when we send out the recording and these other resources, we'll try to answer some of those questions. But if I can pull my screen back up again real quick. I want to thank all of our presenters for taking the time to prepare and put together your presentations, for sharing your knowledge. We've got contact information here if you want to follow up with any one of them. So again, thanks Gary, Jack, Abby, Heather for joining today. As a quick plug going forward, we're going to be doing a program next month that is focused on outdoor public space areas for recycling, and to some extent also we'll touch on organics with that. But it's really, how do you address more the behavior side of litter and actually getting people to put things into the correct bin in the public space, where that really is a unique set of challenges. And we'll have a couple of experts talking on that topic. So look for more information coming out about that in the coming days, and we hope you can join us for that program as well. As I said, we will have the presentation slides and the recording posted for this program in the next couple of days, and we'll send out an email to everybody who registered so that you can access those. And last thing I'll point out is that if you need credit for CEUs for SWAN or other programs, we're happy to provide a certificate of attendance to something that you could submit to make sure you're getting credit for that. And so just reach out to my colleague Rebecca, or you can also email me as well for that. So that's it for our the regular part of our program. We're now officially done with the compost webinar, but I do want, as I said, to invite a couple of my colleagues from our sales team who are going to be talking about some of the products that Busch Systems sells, both for collecting organics but other materials. So for those who choose to stay on, just hold on, and I will make a quick transition. Thank you, Heather. Gary, you can go and turn off your screens now, and then if Michelle and others, you want to turn on yours, I'll do a handover here.